But we're here to hopefully build awareness to individuals in Northern Virginia and beyond about Lyme disease and the impact it can have on individuals. It's a disease that's often misdiagnosed and impacts many families across the country and beyond in many different ways. We're here today just reaching out for you to hopefully get a greater awareness of Lyme disease, and if you find it in your heart to reach out and support B in any way that you feel is possible, would be greatly appreciated. But I'd like to introduce B now and welcome you to our little fireside chat interview that we have.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. Lyme is a horrific disease. I got it 17 years ago and was misdiagnosed, starting way back then, and misdiagnosed for many years along the way as I, knew something wasn't right, and I kept searching and going to doctors. And as I look back now, I think, my God, how did I do that? But there was something in me that kept saying, no, you got to keep going, because there was always so much uncertainty surrounding what was making me feel so sick. And so it's been a long road. I feel really fortunate to have finally gotten an accurate diagnosis, and I'm in a treatment regimen. I'm being treated by a Lyme literate physician, which is the first step when you find out you have Lyme, that you've got to get with somebody who's Lyme literate, because it's such an enormously complex disease. We don't really even know what we don't know about Lyme. It attacks so many different parts of the body. If you don't get it early, it becomes what's known as chronic Lyme. And I have what's referred to as late-stage chronic Lyme. And so that's a lot of, everything I talk about talks to late-stage chronic Lyme. A lot of people say Lyme, oh yeah, no big deal. My cousin had that, or my neighbor had that. They just got on some antibiotics and they were fine. Well, that's one of the biggest keys here is early diagnosis. If you catch it early and you get on oral antibiotics and you get on them long enough, then you'll be fine. The problem is most people don't get on them long enough because the treatment guidelines, and that's the issue and controversy. How long do you treat? How long will insurance companies pay for drug coverage? And Lyme literate physicians would suggest that you need to be on antibiotics for more like 8 to 10 weeks. If you get the bullseye rash, or if you figure out quickly that you have Lyme.
The bullseye rash, and that's a tick syndrome, and Lyme can come through different measures into an individual's body.
Right. Lyme disease is a vector-borne illness, meaning that anything that bites you, any insect that bites you, it's primarily known as a disease that's transmitted through the bite of a deer tick. And there are a couple different kinds of ticks that carry it. And some of them are so tiny that they're the size of a poppy seed that you wouldn't even remember having been bitten. But yeah, they're carried by ticks and also through mosquitoes. That's how I got it. It was through the bite of many mosquitoes. I was vacationing in Florida and I got severely bitten up by mosquitoes, and then 4 weeks later, I was in the hospital fighting for my life.
That was in 1995.
That was in 95, yeah. But you can get it through mites and other vectors.
I think what's really important for people to know out there, and part of your desire in your heart, is for people to have a greater awareness that this is not just a tick and maybe you get it in some distant woods, but it's prevalent.
Absolutely. And Tim, I know you mentioned that it's a common disease here on the East Coast or in the Northern Virginia area. And that's true, but it's everywhere. I mean, I'm from Michigan now. I mean, I've been living in Ann Arbor, Michigan for 14 years, and I know people there who get it. Their doctors don't know that's what they have. Common diagnosis are things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic pain syndrome.
All kind of mysterious items that people kind of say, oh, well, it's in the person's mind, or they're lazy,
Depression.
or depression is this umbrella, is a word you've used often, this umbrella diagnosis happens, or perception of people happens of what you have when it's not specifically known.
But it's very popular here in the Northern Virginia area. And since I've been here for a year and a half, I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned at how every week we hear of 2 to 5 new people. You know, neighbors, friends, friends of friends. I've become pretty active in the National Capital Lyme Association, which is a wonderful association here in the DC area. I would encourage anybody who finds out they have Lyme, there are these groups in their areas, and they're just phenomenal, because it's an excellent way to make friends, because
they can relate to
I mean,
what
you
you're going
learn
through.
as you go through this. And I've often heard people say this, but now I truly understand it. When you go through a serious illness, you often lose people, and it's nobody's fault. You're so sick that you can't keep up with anything, let alone personal friendships. But
yeah, and you probably could never possibly think of, well, that's never going to happen to me. Like anybody that might be listening to this, that couldn't happen to me and my family. But unfortunately, that situation is.
No, I never in a million years would have thought that this would have happened to me.
And divisive.
Oh,
in a way that's unexplainable unless you go through it.
Right. Yeah. Well, it happened to me when I knew I had Lyme. Even my friends were like, "No, you don't have Lyme," and then I would even go the extra mile. I went and saw the head of immunology at the University of Michigan Hospital, who happened to be a friend of a friend, and people didn't want to believe the diagnosis. And I went and saw this guy, and even said, "I want to be tested for Lyme." And he said that he was going to test me for Lyme, fine, no problem. And I couldn't believe it. When I got my records, he never tested me for Lyme.
Really?
He said, "Don't worry about Lyme. You don't have Lyme. We don't get Lyme in Michigan." That's the biggest joke.
Wow. I mean, we've talked a couple of times, but there's always a new perspective, a new insight that you provide when we talk, that it's hard to just summarize this 17-year journey that you've been on.
There's a reason. There's a reason that this happened to me, I think. I don't know what that is, but it is such an enormously complex disease. Doctors don't understand it. Even the doctor that I see, who's, I think the best in the nation, he scared the heck out of me when he said, "I don't know anything about this disease." And I said, "Oh, wow, that's really reassuring."
And you're top of the field.
Yeah.
You're sitting in the top 1%
Yeah, he said,
of the Lyme, like you say, Lyme literate
yeah, he said it's a
professionals.
beast. It's a beast of a disease because it evades the immune system. And that's why it's so hard to test for. We don't have any good testing for Lyme. We have, the best test we have is called the Western blot. But there's no one good test right now. It's largely a clinical diagnosis because, as I said, the disease is able to get around the immune system. It evades the immune system, so your body is not able to create titers against it that you can test for.
So it's good at hiding, deceiving, disappearing, going dormant,
It's the spirochetal bacteria, which is a cousin of syphilis. and it's a corkscrew, thanks Kate, a corkscrew shaped bacteria which allows it to drill through tissue, drill through organs. I mean, it gets, if you have it for, any length of time at all, it loves brain tissue. It goes right to the brain. It loves the heart.
Yeah.
So it drills through tissue, it drills through brain tissue, which is why, people end up with brain damage, like me. It's a phenomenal disease. I mean, if I didn't have it, I would find it so incredibly interesting. And I mean, I still do.
Fascinating. I mean, it really, I mean, it's a deceptive, biological invading element to a body that is tricked almost everybody out there.
It's very frightening, and I think in a lot of ways it's just too frightening. People don't want to deal with it. And I don't blame them, I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
But the sad reality is it's out there, and we have to learn how to protect ourselves against it. And there are a lot of things that you can do, just as far as the way you dress and putting DEET on and things like that. Prevention is key. I mean, it's totally key.
It's almost one of those things, nobody's really worried about it until somebody has heard, somebody has had some impact, and when that story gets closer to individuals, and they hopefully see your story here, when you say dealing with it, today is on a scale of 1 to 10, what is today for you as far as your health, mobility, alertness?
Well, today is actually a great day for me. I mean,
because you're in a treatment process right now, and I think it would be good for people to understand the peaks and valleys.
Yeah,
that
lots of ups and downs, because it's it's a neurological thing. Anything neurological, it's a crapshoot. It's up and down all the time. But it's a good day for me now. I mean, I've been on drugs for a long time, so I'm getting better. I have a long way to go. I mean, as you see, I'm sitting here with an IV going into my arm.
And the IV is in you for how long each day during your treatment?
Well, it depends on which drugs I'm doing, and I'm on a kind of a pulsing regimen. So some days you do different drugs, and you take breaks from different drugs, so your body can adjust. And what you're doing basically is trying to teach your body how to trick the Lyme, and you're teaching your own immune system, which has been so beaten up by the disease.
Misdiagnosis, improper injections, medications.
It gets into every crevice of your body if you get it as bad as I do. It gets into your pituitary gland, which controls all your hormones. I got to the point where I couldn't get in the shower because I couldn't take the heat. The heat of the shower was too much because my body temperature regulation was off because of my pituitary gland being